Hi there, Marc Emery here with Keith Stroup of NORML, and hey, what's the state of NORML? You know what I love about Hempfest is that everybody comes up to Vancouver afterwards, so we're bound to get some interesting people from the movement and all over North America, and I'm very proud to have Keith Stroup here. I have never interviewed him on Pot TV before, so how you feeling?
I'm glad to be here. I am equally as excited about being over in Vancouver. The most exciting political stuff I see going on in the entire world is going on in Canada, and the epicenter of all that seems to be Marc Emery and what stuff you're doing. So frankly, I'm delighted to be here, and I want to learn a little more about what's happening.
Well, lots is going on here. Canada's a place where right now we're having a fair bit of change, and there's a lot of there's a lot of tussling going on between the changes of the marijuana law. There's reaction to it from both the U.S. government, from reactionary elements in our own government, to same-sex marriage. But it's a nation that having a big discussion between the old generation, the younger generation, and fortunately that's encouraging Canada. It's not like going to tear the country apart, and people are looking for progressive solutions. So I'm happy to be in Vancouver. How about you? Are you happy to be in Washington?
Well, I'm happy, but for different reasons. I mean, Washington is a power center, and if you're going to try to influence policy in the United States, you really can't avoid Washington at some point. But that's not because I personally like that climate, of course not. I agree with your analysis. What I see happening in Canada is there may be a little bit of a push and shove of the different generations on issues that used to be difficult, like gay marriages and smoking pot. But it's clear the progressives are winning. Canada's a wonderfully I think, sensitive country as a people. And in this instance, it seems to me like you're being very rational and very thoughtful, and you're going to arrive at a pretty good solution on both those issues. In our country, our population, or the average American, is actually fairly progressive. But our elected officials, of course, are not, and especially the Bush administration.
Well, I'd have to point out to you, the reason that we've got progress here, though, is not because of the politicians. The politicians, with the exception of the Senate's done a great report recommending legalization.
Yeah, they sure did, by the way. And Senator Nolan came down and spoke at our conference this year, and he was just terrific.
Oh, he knows his stuff.
I love his report,
no doubt about it. Knows his stuff, understands the issue. But it's the courts that have done everything for us.
Yeah, it is for you
guys. I mean, I paid for the Supreme Court challenge that David Malmo Levine went to, and Randy Kane and Chris Clay, Alan Young.
John Conroy has a piece that. Alan Young has a piece of that. And you may win that too.
You never know. It's going to be close, 5-4 one way or the other, or something like that. I think. But
by the way, the courts
at all levels, even the fact that I was on a summer of legalization tour, smoking out police departments, 10 cities and 9 provinces in Canada, basically to demonstrate that the court struck down the cannabis law 2 years ago now. In 4 jurisdictions, they agreed with me, and in 6 they did not, which is the ones I got arrested at. But as you pointed out, they'd never let me out of the jails in the United States, so I did that there.
When I was a younger man, frankly, when I was first out of law school, and we were active and we were fighting both the war in Vietnam and marijuana laws, we went to the courts all the time because our court system used to be far more in touch with the people. And so occasionally when our elected officials, our legislatures would get too far off course, you could get the court to come in and say, wait, right to privacy or whatever, you can't arrest somebody for that. That's the last thing you would do in the United States. Now, our judiciary has been engaged in the war on drugs. And in fact, we refer to it as the drug exception to the Bill of Rights. If there's a search issue, for example, in the United States today, you got a good chance that the Fourth Amendment will be applied rigidly, and they better have probable cause or they can't use that, except unless it involves drugs. And then they never throw it out. It's always admissible.
It's like, and you get your property forfeited, but no murderers lose their property.
That's right. That's right.
It's like, okay, let's do something different though. Let's talk about. Tell me the 5 best things that happened in America in regards to the movement in the last year. I mean, I can think of a few.
Well, certainly. Probably the most important is the vote we had in the House of Representatives on the appropriations bill.
I was shocked. 174?
152, but that was 57.
Just for the benefit of our audience, this was a vote to acknowledge the state's right to set their own medical marijuana laws, basically a way of recognizing at the federal level Proposition 215 in California and the 8 other states that have medical marijuana legislation. It was defeated, but by what kind of...
Well, if I can give you a little bit of history, the last year that the House of Representatives ever considered the medical use of marijuana at all was in 1998, and it was something we refer to as the Flat Earth Resolution, where a bunch of Republican legislators got up and introduced a resolution that says marijuana is not a medicine because we say it's not. I don't care what the science says. Right. And everybody fell in, even most of the Democrats. We only had 93 votes on our side, like 300 and whatever on the other side. This time we went from 93 up to 152, and in fact, if we gain about something like 60 more votes, we win next time. And it was a spirited debate. It was very well done. 2/3 of the Democrats in the House of Representatives voted for medical use of marijuana. Never has that happened. They've learned that that's a legitimate issue. 80% of the American public support it. We've been saying that for a while, but the Democrats have finally discovered that. I think that's a sea change.
I was shocked. You couldn't find 10 parliamentarians.
Now, we ended up, you're right, the answer is we still got defeated by about 330.
No, I'd say that was the number one thing, too. I'd say Governor of Maryland at least trying to...
Well, that was important. Governor Ehrlich signing, after a lot of pressure from the White House not to, a medical marijuana bill in Maryland, which frankly was not a very good bill. It started off as a great bill. It got amended down to where it really only allows them to use medical marijuana as an affirmative defense. But that's better than nothing.
You got enough flack for that.
I would say Ed Rosenthal's trial would come in maybe second or third.
Second, I'd say second,
in terms of impact.
How do you think, first of all, tons of coverage, saw him on everything. Ed was great, unusually restrained. Incredible. I even told him, gave him some money, and I said, Ed, you were remarkably restrained at all times. You were really putting on a great show.